Hey everybody, it's Trags alongside Chris Grenham of Celtics blog and of course CLNS Media. We had the chance to talk to Brad Stevens and Doc Rivers about something they both have in common, and that is great expectations here in Boston. Obviously Doc Rivers dealt with it in 2008 and it resulted in an NBA title. Brad Stevens had some interesting comments about how he's going to handle and really address great expectations with these 2018-19 Celtics.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. You know, Brad said it's not really something you discuss. Expectations are something that have to be earned. You don't go in and say, yeah, the Eastern Conference is ours. That's not the way you approach it. And I thought that was interesting. But what he added was even better. And I thought he said, you know, it's not a bad thing to have these expectations going in if you handle them correctly, if you treat them correctly. And so they can help going in and, you know, rise up how you expect to go into the season. So I think it's important, and I think this team knows that they're all going to have to sacrifice something for these expectations to come true, and so I think Brad has a good handle on it.
Doc Rivers said essentially the same thing. He said, look, it's always a good thing to have great expectations, especially in a basketball-crazy city and market like Boston, and I think you have to embrace it. And that's what, you know, I asked Doc Rivers about how his team embraced that challenge back in 2007, 2008, and he said, essentially, yeah, you have to embrace it, embrace the pressure, but we also had a mentally tough group. How mentally tough these Celtics are, you figure they're going to be mentally tough, but still they have to prove it on the court.
They have to prove it on the court, and they have to prove that they are willing to sacrifice minutes, sacrifice, you know, time on the court, because obviously this team is going to be ridiculously deep. They were deep last season, and now with the return of Kyrie Irving and Gordon Hayward, it's going to take a little bit to get used to, you know, guys like Terry Rozier and Marcus Smart not getting as many minutes as they did last season. So obviously that's going to take some time and a little adjustment. But Terry Rozier said it a few weeks ago at his camp. You know, you have to be willing to sacrifice. And Doc and Brad reiterated that tonight. So I think that's the most important thing here.
And obviously, you have to be willing to work. And I think the whole sacrifice theme is something Doc Rivers mentioned several times to us in speaking. They are both, Doc Rivers and Brad Stevens, speaking at the ABCD Boston community event here inside TD Garden, something very close to both of those gentlemen. Right. And, you know, Doc Rivers is saying, look, if these teams, if this team, the Celtics team, is willing to sacrifice, they can do anything. Yeah,
and I think the players understand that, you know, in the bits and pieces we've heard from the team over this offseason, I think that's been very clear. They know they have to sacrifice, and Doc made a good comparison. You know, Golden State is the best team in the league right now, the best team in the world, and a lot of those players know that they could be doing more. They could be scoring more points. They could be padding their stats, but they know that if they were to do that, they wouldn't have as good of a product on the floor. So, you know, that's something that the Celtics are going to have to get through their heads, and I think they'll be okay with that. And once they realize the phenomenal product that they can have once they sacrifice those minutes, it's going to be pretty special.
Obviously, when we're talking about sacrifice, we're talking about two players in particular, Terry Rozier and Marcus Smart. But Doc Rivers said, hey, maybe there comes a point in the season where Kyrie Irving has to do a little sacrificing.
Yeah, and I mean, that's and I think he'd be willing to do that. Again, it's not just those guys like Rozier and Smart that have to be willing to do that. It's everyone. People like Gordon Hayward, like Kyrie Irving. And it sounds ridiculous, but mid-season, if Brad wants to get, you know, guys like Rozier more minutes, then it's Irving's minutes who are going to decrease. And he's a guy who knows what he's doing, and he's been through this before where the sacrifice to get to where you want to be, i.e. a championship, is needed. So, you know, their understanding is pretty solid in that regard.
How much do the 2018-19 Celtics want to sacrifice? How bad do they want that 17th, or I should say 18th NBA banner hanging above us here inside TD Garden? That will really be the story of these Celtics this season. We'll have you covered on Celtics on CLNSmedia.com. We'll, of course, have you covered on Twitter at Celtics CLNS. Inside TD Garden, he's Chris Grenham. I'm Mike Petralia, CLNS Media.